Welcome to the Troy City Council Special Study Session for April 22nd, 2013. The roll call, Ms. Bittner?
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember McGinnis? Here. Councilmember Pennington?
Here.
Councilmember Teets?
Here. All present. This evening we have one study session item, C1, which is the proposed fiscal year 2013-2014 annual budget and three-year budget. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to City Manager Kishnick for the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, and City Council, staff, and we do have a few staff here. I'd like to introduce all of them.
I'll go to each one.
But anyway, I want to thank them all for coming, even sitting in the hall, and the concerned residents and interested residents and educated residents as well, not to mention mayoral candidates. This is my first opportunity to go through the budget with staff and with the City Council. So I started in the budget office, so I'm very excited about that. I will tell you that we've put together an outline that talks about the path that we want to take. We want to be mindful of the clock so that this with question and answers concludes tonight approximately at 9:30. So as people go through their presentations, they need to know that and be mindful of that, including myself. So we will have this whole process, if you will be a little different than maybe what you've seen in the past, and it is more of a continuation of where we started in the winter time when we did the department reports, presentations, the fund balance presentations, and reviewed budget, personnel, operations, efficiencies, and developed consensus points for each department. And this process tonight continues those consensus statements and identifies the areas that we were able to show them in the budget, fund them in the budget, address them in the document that you're going to review the next couple of nights. Fortunately, we are not recommending any rate increases, whether it's millage rates or whether it's sewer water rates. The only rate increase, Tom's about to fall off his chairs, I say that, is the refuse. Because when we went through that process, and I know the Public Works guys are here, thank you for raising your hand, we identified the fund balance as anemically low in that fund, and so this is an attempt to address that and still have a very, I think it's $109 a year rate for sanitation, which from where I'm from is very, very competitive. So the City of Troy remains competitive. Our goal is to keep and continue a competitive nature in Troy, keep it conservative, but identify and address the areas that we talked about during the presentations where Troy needs to find this balance again, because the crash of 08 to where we are today, 2013, you've made many, many changes that we've talked about, whether it's efficiencies, whether it's cuts in personnel, whether it's concessions, whether it's delayed projects and infrastructure. It certainly is an opportunity now to reflect on where we've been, discuss where we are, and plot the course of where we're going in the most effective and efficient way for the City of Troy. So it really is a reflection and a rebalancing budget, as I would say when I look at it. The outline is a review of the top 12 strategies. I won't read this. A lot of this information, folks, is reference material. I'll hit the highlights, at least during my presentation, so that we've covered some, but the rest is for your reading pleasure when you get home tonight from 10 to midnight. We'll go over the taxable values. Nina will go over the taxable values, and you know that's the foundation for the budget really, and it's really what you have all talked about, whether it's commercial, industrial, or residential. I'll talk about general fund balance just because that's the area that I really enjoy talking about, because I think that's where there's a lot of conflict. I think that's where there's a lot of philosophies, and I think that's where a lot of things come together, and I've enjoyed it for 20 years, so I'm going to do it with the City of Troy as well. So then Tom is going to talk about general fund revenue expenditures and do an overview of sort of the general fund budget from a macro standpoint. and then we'll do the departmental summaries, hopefully conclude tonight at 5G, so I think somebody said we're on 5Gs. And then come back Wednesday, and Capitol Bill will do the capital improvement plan, and we'll have a lot of discussion about that in terms of unmet needs, and then what is funded. And we will be talking about utilizing $1 million in fund balance for capital, which is a one-time use of the funds, because infrastructure is so important. And I just watched your budget message on the front of our City of Troy webpage, and it talks about infrastructure. So you've always put an emphasis on infrastructure, it appears, and we want to continue with that same theme. Special revenue funds, enterprise funds, debt service funds, and then we'll get to 3-year projections, which everyone likes to see in terms of where we're going. We have identified some changes already to the budget that we need to make, and we'll talk about those as we go along and summarize them and have a further dialogue. And then on May 20, we will bring the budget to the City Council for your adoption, consideration for adoption. And some people ask me when that will happen, so I put that up here. Good. So here's the strategies, just briefly. Let me say one other thing. So there's the staffing levels. We're going from 319 to 323, 319 to 323. So that is an increase. We're adding just summation form, adding 2 in the police department, 1 fully funded, the other partially funded, 3 in the library, and then elimination of 1 risk manager from this year to next. So a net 4. So everything that we've talked about, that's where the personnel changes are occurring. This is the top 12 in reverse order, and I won't go over them because I'll hit the highlights as we go along here. The number 12 is increase the lines of communication with Troy schools. And as you know, we initiated the first City Council Troy School Board meeting to discuss mutual issues and build relationships. I don't mean to say first as if it's never happened. I don't know if it's happened, but first since I've been here in this process. Then the library director is working with Mark Washington, the head of Troy School District, on ways to collaborate, partner, and share resources. And I think they should be commended for tapping into the new person at the school and identifying lots of opportunities to keep the lines of communication open. Moving along, we have, as I said, budgeted for a police officer to work in the schools with partial funding from the school, as well as continuing the grade-oriented presentations in the classroom. Number 11, develop 3-year budget projections. We certainly are going to continue doing the 3-year budget projections. Improve roads, examine the budget allocation. Present a budget of $2.6 million with major roads construction and $3.1 for local roads, and we will be discussing more opportunities for more funding or more opportunities for projects to continue to improve the roads in the City of Troy. I'd be remiss, I guess, if I didn't say that when you do see a poor road, it's probably a county road in the City of Troy. But certainly we are investing in roads, and we'll continue to have that conversation. It was discussed that we should reevaluate Vision 2020, assistant to the city manager. Saharish is here, and she's going to embark upon that project, as well as the ICMA study, as well as the Zucker report, and summarizing and creating an action plan for that as well. Not to mention the library strategic plan that they're implementing also. Evaluate efficiencies for outsourcing. We've budgeted human resources, recruitment and retention specialist, benefits consultant. That could be a person, could be a consultant, and we talked about that. So we budgeted $50,000 to accomplish that goal. As you recall, the situation was we have a hard time getting employees hired in a timely fashion because of the cuts that have happened in HR. Now on top of that, you have all the benefit changes, the different benefit plans, and the benefit evaluations that need to go on to make sure that we're cost effective and efficient. So we'll continue we've added that in the budget. We will review the Billy Casper Golf Course contract to determine if there are efficiencies there. I met with them once, and it appears that there are some opportunities for discussion between Tom and myself and the Billy Casper folks in that contract. We'll also, as we discussed, analyze the viability of outsourcing the aquatics operation to see if there is a way to make, to be a little more efficient in that area as that email keeps going through. The Promote Troy, the library's teen advisory board is great, and in fact, we saw them in action, so that was outstanding. The teen librarian position is also funded. Family Fest at the Aquatic Center, more family opportunities, family events is what we're promoting, trying to find ways to create family environment, family situations, and also budgeting $50,000 for marketing and education services to coordinate with the other departments, the library being one, the police department, the fire department, and community affairs and recreation. Then redevelop sites, office space was another strategy, and certainly the economic development department and Glenn Lathan and Mark continue to do that. And on May 13th, you will see their presentation, Creating an Environment for Investment, which is pretty impressive. And we talk about it all the time on how we can be responsive and keep that environment for investment going. Number 5, strengthen police and fire. Consider putting police officers back in the school. We certainly have done that by putting a police officer, resource officer, partially funded by the school. We've also funded Somerset Collection Office. We haven't, but Somerset has, which will help strengthen the police and fire. And then on the fire side, we've initiated the steps to establish the Volunteer Firefighter Incentive Program as a formal trust, formal plan, if you will, not just this line item in the budget that isn't really a formal trust plan. We've initiated those steps, and we continue to do that with legal counsel and the City Attorney Bloom. Not to mention in this, the firefighter incentive pay, we've budgeted monies to go from 605 per year to 642 per year. However, we just got an actuary that says we need an additional $78,000 to make that whole, so we will be talking about that as we go through the process at the end. But the bulk of it was funded until we got the actuary, so that's the remaining amount. And that is to make that increase, and they haven't had an increase, where's the chief? Since what year, chief?
2008.
2008 in the firefighters incentive plan, so. Then the firefighters appreciation banquet was scheduled, and the date is in April 2014. That was discussed, and so that will happen as well. Supporting the transit center, holding promotional events, I think that speaks for itself as we go through the summer. Steve and Bill and Mark and Cindy do a great job of keeping the transit center moving forward, and they will do that to make sure that there's support for the transit center and promotional events are held. Improving the public perception of the city and utilizing social media, that certainly is something that the marketing person and the community affairs will do as we go forward. In the DPW and many others in here have already identified ways to utilize social media to get the word out. Number 2, find a solution to the DDA bond issue. We will be presenting a formal plan to the DDA at the next meeting in May. We briefly discussed it last week? And a plan that we've put together that we think can help to sort of share the pain, but to create a situation where there's no default and no impact on the city of Troy. So I've met with a lot of people, a lot of financial people, a lot of legal people, a lot of the internal team to do just that. Attract and retain quality employees. The first one is for budgeting for a half reduction of furlough day requirements. We didn't take it all out, we just took half, trying to take an incremental approach to this so that we get hours back, so there's productivity gains while people are getting hours back. And you see the cost to do that. That is fully loaded cost by Mr. Darling and his group. Eliminating the unpaid time requirements where you work You don't get paid for 39 hours annually, and you see the cost of $184,000. Eliminating that, providing a 1% salary merit pay, which costs $400,000, a $500 lump sum incentive pay a la the county for all full-time employees, so that there's no built upon cost to that, no accumulated cost. And we budgeted for the establishment of an employee recognition program with a budget of $10,000. Increased education and training budgets, budgeted for contracted recruitment retention specialists. We talked about that before, and utilizing full-time employees through internships. And now, so that is the list of strategies and the overview of what is in this budget, and most of that should have been in my letter that I put together. So that's a summary, and then Nino's going to talk about the values.
Good evening, thank you. As Mr. Kitchenik said, we're trying to get out of here at 9:30, so he's going to limit me to an hour and 15 minutes. And all of my colleagues here get 1-minute summaries, so I'll try to rush through this as quick as I can. If you look at the chart here, the good news is that the bad news isn't that bad. We were projecting a loss of about 0.5% here. If you look under the 2014 year, for like $2.4 million drop. On a $4 billion taxable value, that's nothing, it's 0.5%. So those numbers look good. The reason for that is the residential class. Assessed value went up about 4%. When you're budgeting, you only care about taxable value. Taxable value, we captured about 2.3%. CPI was 2.4, so we had some properties where we didn't get the whole 2.4%. Commercial industrial was still down this year. The commercial class went down about 6.5%. The industrial class went down 7%. There's still some trouble out there in the industrial class. The surprise this year was commercial personal property. It was up 14%. I mean, that was something we just did not see coming at all. On the other hand, the industrial personal property was down almost 13%. The change, therefore, on the personal property class was a 5% increase. That's not something we were expected. That had a lot to do with that $2.5 million drop that we saw, because a ton of that is commercial personal property. What that means is that we're starting to get some tenants into the vacant spaces. Because of the reduced rents and the tenant improvements, they call them TIs, that the landlords are putting in, there's no real effect on the real property value, but every new tenant that moves into Troy brings their personal property with them. That's where we got that big bump in the commercial personal property. So that's a really good thing for us. You notice moving out a couple of years here, 15, we're down just a little bit in 15. We don't expect the commercial personal property to hold up. A lot of the equipment is older, and the first year's depreciation is going to be pretty high on that. And then we're back up a little bit in 16, so the thing is looking good. We're starting to pick up some taxable value. If you're looking out 5 years, we could be looking at 1%, 2% increases, which would be great. Bearing in mind, I think everyone that's here has heard this story except Mr. Pennington. At 2% increases, it's still going to take us to like 2028 to get back to 2008 value. So I mean, it's a long haul, but it's optimistic right now. We're looking good. We're looking very well right now. When Mr. Darling gets into his presentation, he's going to show you some of the net taxable numbers, which is what the city's general fund is funded by, because we do have captures from our tax increment plans, the DDAs, the LDFAs. They do capture some of that money. So these numbers here are the gross numbers. This is overall in the city, and when Tom gets into his budget, he'll point out to you the actual net numbers that we're getting. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because it's important that you're comfortable with your millage rate. It's a very important thing for you to look at. You see on this chart, first off, the first thing you have to remember, if you've forgotten by chance, townships have much lower millage rates than cities. They don't provide anywhere near the services we do. And if you first look at this chart, the first thing you're going to say is, well, we've got the third lowest millage rate in Oakland County. Well, it's not necessarily the way it works. You have to remember that Rochester Hills, I did a little work this afternoon because I was surprised at some of these other numbers. I didn't actually put this chart together. It was done in Mr. Kitchenik's office. You notice Rochester Hills is a little bit lower than us. Lake Angeles is quite a bit smaller than us, so that's not an issue. Novi is lower than us, and Bloomfield Hills is lower than us. Rochester Hills, Novi, Bloomfield Hills, no refuse pickup. Our refuse millage is $1.05. If you add that onto those, all of a sudden we're #1 again. So I mean, we do technically, for a full-service community, we have the lowest millage rate in Oakland County. What's also important for you to understand, because I went to the website again, I love doing that. In Macomb County, we'd be the lowest millage rate by $2.20. In Wayne County, we'd be the lowest millage rate by $2.52. In other words, you could levy almost 13 mills here, and you'd still be the lowest in Wayne and Oakland County. We're the lowest right here in Oakland County. You really can't beat that. It's good planning. As Mr. Kishnick said, it has a lot to do with the cuts that we've made and holding our revenue steady. To get further down here, as you can see, this is in order, reverse order of millage. Oak Park's got the highest millage, 29.84, compared to your 10.48. Important that you're comfortable with that, because you've done a good job holding that rate down, still providing services to your citizens. Am I doing questions now?
You can do questions whenever
Any
there's a
questions?
question.
If you'd like some more clarification? Thank you.
Thank you, Nino. Yes, please, if there's a question, just bring it up, and we'll attempt to answer it right now. So I'd like to do the general fund revenues from a snapshot, not talking about all these, but as Nino says, things are getting better, but he just can't get the revenue to come in. If he could do that, things would be a lot easier in terms of the tax revenues. But you can see, it looks like it's flattened out. At least it's moderated, let's put it that way. And I think everybody feels that. Everybody feels that the economy has certainly picked up, and the residential market in Troy is very, very strong, all over the place, and I can tell you all about it. But the 47 million, 47, 48, I think you can see that it certainly has leveled out in terms of revenues. Now, you do have a policy to maintain 15% unassigned fund balance. So when you look at the fund balance numbers down here at the bottom, when we bring in the expenditures and we bring in the surpluses from previous years, and you look at 2.4, 2.26, 2.4 is what we're projecting this year, the end of the current fiscal year, and then the proposed is a negative, say, $600,000. 15% is about $7.5 million, right? It's not enough to weather a Michigan storm, and you should have felt that during the 2010 timeframe. It's not enough. Those were the days in the 80s, 90s when you were saying, auditors were saying, well, 10 to 12% is what they were saying. Townships have 100% in fund balance, and most communities strive to get more than 15% nowadays because of the Michigan storms that happen. And if there's one thing that you're guaranteed to change in Michigan, it's the weather and it's the economy, right? And it has wild swings. So 15%, in just my recommendation, is not enough. But it looks like when you're showing 2.4, 2.2, 6, this is the anomaly from 2012, and it shows all the work that you did, the early retirement incentive program that was a one-time deal, where everybody was gone. You had the chief had lots of vacancies that he was trying to fill. It took a long time to fill, and you all experienced those, and we talked about that. So that's the product of a lot of people taking advantage of the early retirement program, the concessions that were made to balance the budget, and you're doing this all in an environment where you really didn't know what was going to happen. You're hoping, with some strong management, which is what you have and had, you wanted to make sure that you weren't going to be in trouble, and it worked. So now you're rebalancing the ship and trying to find, if you're at 52 million in revenue and 49 million in expense, 49 million in expense, what your fund balance is going to be, and trying to get that close to zero. And I talked about the vacancy factor, which a municipality or two utilized. I wouldn't recommend that, but certainly what we aim to do, because of productivity, because of where you've come from 2008 to today, you don't want vacancies. Some municipalities want vacancies, so you save all this money, it looks great at the end of the year. That's not what you want in Troy. You don't have the employees to be able to absorb the work from all the vacancies. So you need full employment, full staffing, which is why the human resources position is so critical to help get staffing going, whether it's the police department and other departments as well. So I can't stress enough that the fund balance is a function of the times, what you were doing, how you were trying to rebalance the budget and the finances of the city of Troy. And now, you can see it's certainly leveling out, and as we go out, we're projecting to use some, but those will certainly be fine-tuned as we go along. Not knowing who knew revenue sharing was gonna climb $800,000? I know you guys didn't budget it, because when I looked at your budget originally, it definitely was not in there. And thank goodness you didn't do that, because that would be a recipe for disaster. But it shows up in the bottom line at the end of the year when the CAFR comes out. So now we've readjusted that line item, because it's a pretty sizable line item, to make sure that it's accounted for. So we're tightening up these numbers as everything starts to rebalance and comes together. Any questions on that?
Ron, just to point, this general fund unassigned balance, we had a target of 15, we're at like 45 now, right?
You're at, you're projected 24, and your expenditures are, let's just say 50.
Right at 50,
So
45.
40 to 45, right?
Proposed for 14, but, yeah.
And then trending down a bit, depending on how those numbers get readjusted, though, as reality starts to come in. So, I'd say 35 to 45 is your range. And, infrastructure is certainly the place to work on that number, and making sure that, the balance is there between the people who are doing the work in the city of Troy and the infrastructure that's out there that's needed. So with that, yeah, well, sorry.
So you would say the ideal is between 35 and 45? I mean, is that what I heard you say, or is that,
You didn't hear me say that at all?
okay, I misunderstood.
So what I said is, I think you're right. What I said was, I think you're
Where we
between
actually
35 and 45. I think that's kind of where your boat's floating, if you will. And I think that's a pretty comfortable place, but it's not overly comfortable, that's for sure.
Okay.
That make sense? All right. I'll turn it over to Tom.
Well, thank you. As an accountant, you must know that this is the culmination of the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Stanley Cup all in one when it comes to budget time. So I appreciate all the enthusiastic faces, and get going with this. Again, kind of kicking off where Mr. Kissling left off, just a quick history lesson. Again, in 2007, we were supporting revenues and expenditures of around 63 million in expenditures that were higher than our revenues of around 61 million. Clearly, we had the economic situation happen, and it became a race to the bottom, right? If we could try and align our expenditures along with the decrease in our revenues. And so, at that point, management took the action of restructuring the organization, trying to flatten it out, eliminate positions, instituted the employee concessions, along with the early retirement incentive program. As you can see, it worked almost very, very successfully, at least at the end. In 2012, again, we talked about that $6 million that we were able to actually add to fund balance. And why is that? Well, one of the reasons is in 2012, because of the early retirements and the elimination of positions, we were budgeted for 348 positions in 2012. At the end of 2012, we had 294 employees. That's over 54 employees that were budgeted for that we didn't fund, that we're trying to fill positions after kind of this big void. And as you can see, we're starting to make progress in 13 and in 14 again to try and balance out kind of restructuring after this big restructuring to get that balanced out. So that's kind of a history and where we think we're going in the big picture. Again, in 14, we're budgeting for about 52.1 million in revenues and about 52.7 million in expenditures overall for the general fund. Next, we'll talk about the revenues line by line, account by account. So account number 1. But we will talk about 4 kind of big high-level points. Again, where our revenue sources come from, what it looks like from a 3-year budget, taxes per an average residential home, how our taxes as far as dollars go are in comparison with other communities, and talk a little bit about state shared revenue. So again, where do our revenues come from? Well, again, 56.9%, 56.9% of it is from property taxes. 13.4% is from federal and state sources. So if you add really those 2 sources up, our 2 primary sources, that's over 70% of our revenue sources. Next, as Nino was talking and Mr. Kisnet about taxable values, I'm going to try and put these into dollars. Again, it's overall from a total standpoint, we're pretty flat, and we're pretty flat really up through 16. Very minimal increases from taxable value standpoint, and how that equates to after the TIFA districts, how it relates to us in revenues. Again, you got property taxes up here. Again, slowing down, just showing very slight increases. Okay, let's talk about the average tax paper and the average taxable value of a home. The average taxable value from Nino's perspective is about $99,172. So if we look at that and apply basically our millage rates, the average resident is going to pay, was paying around $1,051 in 2006, all the way up to $1,156 in 2009. And then, of course, we had the big decrease. And as they go, we can see that they're actually increasing overall, and this is citywide. From the general fund perspective, again, still pretty flat, just slight increases from a residential perspective. Now, again, you might ask yourself, well, Tom, you just told me that overall tax revenues are going down. Why are, me as a resident, why are my taxes showing a slight increase as we go through time? And again, Nino was telling you about, yes, residential values are increasing, which is a good thing, but our commercial and industry are still lagging significantly behind, I think, 2018-19 before they even start to show any kind of flattening out. So then we're going to take those, and again, Nino talked about taxable values in the surrounding district and mills, actually millage, excuse me, not taxable values. And so let's just compare that then into true dollars again. From our chart before, Troy's around 1,043 compared to if you had the same residence, same taxable, from a taxable value standpoint in some of these other communities, what those property taxes would be. Again, it just illustrates the point from a dollar perspective of what a value that Troy is in kind of comparing some of the similar services. Finally, from a revenue standpoint, a big player was always state shared revenue. As you can see, starting in 2001, and believe me, it starts up here, but it's always been a steady, continuous decline of state shared revenue, of the state giving back basically our state sales tax to finally in 2010 and 11 it was around 5.6 million. For the first time since I can remember, there was an increase in 2012. And so there's 2012, we're also projecting a slight increase for 13, and then we get again kind of conservative in estimating what the state's going to do. So again, we're always conservative with our revenue sources. So that's a good point in developing our budget. Let's talk about general fund expenditures. Again, we'll talk a little bit about the history. Then we'll kind of break it down into a couple of different viewpoints. A, by function, what we're spending by function, i.e. public safety, general government, recreation services, and then we'll break it apart by account. Personal services, supplies, and contractual type services. Okay, so let's look again overall from an expenditure side. Our high point again was in like 2007 with around $63 million in expenditures. Again, we adjusted our expenditures as we went through recessionary times to a low of around 45.9 in 2012. We're projecting for 2013 that our expenditures are going to be around in the $49.7 million range. The 2014 proposed budget, 14 through 16, is 52.7, 52.9, and 54 even. Again, kind of some slow, steady growth to try and, again, balances and aligns with what we believe our revenue streams are going to be. Now, taking it from a perspective, okay, what are we spending on function? Again, it's always been from what I understand you telling us, the big parts that Troy is about public safety and about infrastructure. As we can see from here, if you take the 52.7 million, again, that we talked about general fund expense, 30.4 is in public. 30.4 million is dedicated to public safety, i.e., police, fire, and building inspection. 8.2 is in streets and parks. So again, the public safety and the maintenance of our infrastructure are two most important things as far from a budgeting standpoint of how we allocate those funds. So again, if we added that together, basically about 72% of our expenditures in our budget for the general fund is related to public safety or the maintenance of our infrastructure. Next, let's talk a little bit about objects from an object standpoint. And when we say object, we mean personal services, supplies, and our other services or contractual type service expenditures. Again, we are a service industry. As such, we are labor intensive with 64.9% of our expenditures related to personal services. Again, 30.5% is related to other service charges, and about 4.6% is related to supplies. So we're going to take out each one of these real quick and kind of break them down a little bit. Again, kind of a history of what we've done with our these objects. Again, you can see personal services has significantly decreased from 2009 to 2012. Personal services about 42.2 million in 2010 to about 30.1 million in 2012. Again, we're budgeting steady increases related to our personal services to try and really reestablish or reinitiate some of those employee concessions in 13 and 14, or in 14, and build up the staffing shortages that we'd have. Again, for contractual services, these other services charges, it's about 14 million. We've been kind of hanging around the 14 million area from 2010 to 2012. We can see a slight increase in 13 and 14, and a lot of that is related to some contractual services that we've done for building inspections. In other words, the safe built type contracts to do our building inspections. So it's decreased some of our personnel, but of course then that increases contractual services. Okay, let's now break personal services down just a little bit. For personal services, again, we're going from about 32.5 million in 13 budget to 30.2 million in 2014, or an increase of about $1.7 million, or 5.1%. We break that down between salaries and benefits. We're going up about $724,000 for salaries, or about 3.9% is what's budgeted, and benefits are increasing about $931,000, or 6.7%. With this being said, in benefits, I wanted to kind of peel that onion back just a little bit more and talk about benefits for active versus our legacy costs. Of course, we had a defined benefit program and a defined benefit for health care that the actuaries tell you have to make a required contribution to every year. With that, You see, if we had the actuaries give us an estimate, if a person was coming for our active person coming in, what would that funding ratio be to fund just that person? And typically, so we take that and we apply the $3 million that the actuary says that we have to contribute, say, to the healthcare system. And we take out for the active people that really 5.3% would be related to somebody coming in or to our active people. So the difference really is funding for people that are already in the system into our retirees. So I tried to break it out between what are legacy costs that are embedded in those actuarially required contributions to try and give us a better idea of where those costs are coming from. Are they coming from current active employees or promises that were made to retirees, basically? And so we can see if we break that out, it's really about a 5.4% increase for benefits for the active employees, and trying to refund some of those legacy costs. It's about 11, almost 12% increase. Again, part of that is this increase is trying to fund up to that level that the actuary gives us as a hard dollar, because the actuary will give you basically two ways to fund it. So you either need to give $3 million or 35% of payroll. Well, as we budgeted in the prior year, we were budgeting as 35% of payroll. But guess what? Our wages had decreased so much, what we were contributing to the system wasn't near what the actuary was expecting. In fact, when the actuary does his valuation, he gives you a projected payroll. During this time, our projected payroll in total was around $28 million. Well, we don't come close to spending $28 million, and nor are we budgeted to spend $28 million in wages. So the next time they do their evaluation, which for the healthcare system is every 2 years, so we won't find out that their magic number for a few months. But with that being said, we think that we're going to be prepared to make those contributions. And well, we should, because at the end of the day, if you don't make that contribution from a dollar amount, the next time they do the valuation, they tend to go up. So we want to try and steady that ship and go on more a dollar amount as opposed to a percentage of payroll type contribution. Have I hammered that one enough? Okay. All right, let's talk about, again, this correlates to personnel, and this is, again, in 2008, we were budgeted at 472 full-time employees, and again, through the reductions, in 2013, we budgeted 319 employees, and again, Mr. Kissnick has already talked about our net four that we're proposing in the 2014 to 2016 budget. Let's talk a little bit about supplies then. Supplies, just real quick. Operating supplies, we can see is going up about $92,000. That's really more related to, in our public safety, are some police vests and some new vehicle equipment is what's kind of pushing that. And then in the other category went up another $45,000. That's related to some fuel for some specialty vehicles for public safety and some uniforms for hopefully 15 new police officers that we're going to be bringing in. And then the last object was the service charges. Again, professional contracted services went up about $483,000. All of that increase, a lot of it is to do with our building inspection or safe bill of around $222,000. Now let's keep in mind, they generate revenue. So this is basically covered. Basically their fees are about 75% of the fees that they generate. So from an expenditure side, yes, they went up $222,000, but on the revenue side, it was more to offset that. The other things to talk about in the operating of this $483,000 is about $190,000 to help finish the digital imaging services for our planning department to make us more electronic and efficient in doing business with the city, and to get those documents again on an electronic type image. Again, utilities are pretty fat with an inflation factor. Rentals are up about $190,000, which is more related to the charges to our departments for our motor pool services. And that's kind of a general fund overview from the 1,000-foot level.
Need to click it.
Oh, really?
Your time's over, it's up to me. I will do my best to replicate that enthusiasm. But I know right off the bat I'm gonna fall short. We started with the conclusions, the direction for the council, and items to focus on. So the first item is the employee recruitment retention. We focused on the point on furlough and the other items that Mr. Kishnick has already discussed is covered under the items that will help us to retain employees. We're going to continue hiring to fill vacancies. We've got the numbers that we presented if the council is interested in that. Things are moving along very well in that direction. We're looking to put boots on the ground, and that is they have increased staffing by 2 police officers, and those will be operational positions, they won't be support positions. We're looking for 2 positions added this budget, and that allows a slow incremental increase. One would be a school resource officer. What we did is we took the actual time that they would spend in schools and figured and worked out with the school system that they would pay half the time they've spent in schools. I can get into that a little bit more later. The Somerset collection, we're going to add an officer there, and that'll be 100% paid by the Somerset collection. That includes everything from the car, equipment, everything. We're also directed to meet with the Troy School Board. Mr. Kishnick and I met with the superintendent and have set up a meeting for the city council to meet with the school board on May 28th. More detail on the 2 positions. The school resource officer will be a fully marked, fully equipped, uniformed police officer driving a marked unit that would be able to respond to schools in case there's any disasters or issues. That officer will have a tactical response bag. That officer will be charged with coordinating and continue to coordinate in the police department and with the Troy School District, security, and the which is currently funded by, provided by the Safe Ed company, and we will coordinate with the school administrators. When the Troy School District is not in session, that police officer will be charged with working with some of the other schools that are non-Troy School District within the city of Troy, preschools and other programs like that, as well as assisting us in our community services section. The Somerset collection officer will allow maximum exposure at the Somerset collection. They'll be a fully uniformed police officer in a fully marked car. They will maintain a relationship with the Somerset collection merchants, and there'll be a high profile there. Their hours and schedule will be based on what works out best for that officer in the Somerset collection. So that'll be based on when they have events there as well as when they have peak shopping days. So that's a win-win for the Somerset collection and for the Troy Police Department. You've all seen this chart before. The main point in this is we're increasing the 2 positions from 97 to 99. So that's 2 additional police officers in this budget. Nothing else changes. You've all seen this one before. This shows our rise as we increase the number of police officers and our decline as the budget problems hit. This will rise us from 97 to 99. This still puts us pretty much in line where we were when I started at the Troy Police Department in 1979. Then he has to show some continued efficiencies. One of our continuing efficiencies that saves $1.8 million a year is we've reduced the number of command officers in the police department by 13 positions. The positions are all listed here. The work still remains, but I give all the command officers an opportunity for growth to do more work and spread the work around a little bit for them. I wanted to illustrate that just by showing the new org chart, organizational chart. In the past, this chart had 3 captains, each with their own division. If I had the other chart up here, which you've all seen in the past, the organizational chart has shrunk appreciably because we just don't have the amount of people and different units and assignments that we did in the past. And then under my section is the professional standards section, which is in charge of training and internal investigations. Other continued efficiencies is the fact that police officers are doing more work. When you look at the number of police officers we have and the amount of work that we have, they're being very efficient, they're doing more with less. The total number sworn we have has decreased 21%. So we've gone from 123 to 97 in 12. Next year we're going to go up to 99. Our calls for service, each call for service is let me restate that. Each police officer handles 27% more calls for service. So what that means is we have less officers. Our calls for service have remained pretty much the same, but each officer is doing more calls for service. The arrests have increased. We've actually increased our number of arrests by 160 over what we had. We're more fully staffed in 10. That shows a 43% increase in the amount of arrests that each police officer is making. It's very well illustrated in our number of drunk driving arrests, which has gone up 20 arrests, which equals 33% when you factor in the decrease in the amount of arrests that are being made. Each police officer is making 33% more drunk driving arrests. So productivity's up. Part of the reason for that is we reduced the fact that they have to respond to requests for ambulance runs. You may remember that was one of the ICMA recommendations. We no longer send officers to runs where they're not needed because it looks like there's an assaulted type crime or the ambulance company's going to need assistance or it's a life-threatening emergency. Those are the ones we don't send them to. So if looks like there's an assaultive crime, there's a life-threatening emergency, or there's a problem that doesn't look like it can be handled by the ambulance company, we still go. But we've eliminated 2,000 requests for ambulance runs that we go on. That means each officer is doing 33% less requests for ambulances. So what that does is it frees them up for some of these other items. Good illustration of that is drunk driving arrests went up 33%. Requests for ambulance with police officers went down 33%. So if we make them more available, they can do more work. This just illustrates the number of officers that we had in 2010, 123, currently 97. Some of the efficiencies we've done is we are utilizing our desk officers more. The number of reports that they're taking on the desk have gone down. We no longer have police officers working on the desk. So the number of times that police officers have to come to the station has gone down appreciably, while the number of reports taken by the desk attendants has gone up. The request for ambulance, no police officer, those were zero because police officers went on all request ambulance in 2010. In 2012, there was 2,006 requests for ambulances that we did not go on. In our online reporting is something we just started last year. In 2010, we had none. Last year, we had 186. So that frees up police officers for other duties. I'm not going to go through all this in detail. You've seen this before. We mentioned the vests. We have to replace vests. They have a life cycle to them. We have some increased costs with our vests. The charges for services went up because this is revenue coming in. It reflects the Somerset officer that we're being reimbursed for and the Troy Schools officer. So that's more revenue that's coming in. The other things are pretty much the same. Brief overview of our operating capital history. For our operating budget, when you look at it, as Mr. Kishnick, I believe, was pointed out, or maybe it was Mr. Darling, we had that $6 million surplus. That money is, a bulk of that was our money that went back in because we were short personnel. So we didn't spend the money because we didn't have the people in there. That went back into the general fund. This year, we estimate $1.2 million is going to go back in the general fund that we won't be using because we're short personnel still. The increase here for our capital budget is for some servers, mobile data computers, and some security issues around the police building and the city hall facility. That's to get some more security items in. I want to briefly touch on this. This is in your packet so you can look through it for detail. So I won't go into a lot of detail. We focus on getting grants back into the police department to help us buy some equipment. We've always considered our drug forfeiture money used for equipment. We're looking at this as grants. So we got some grants from the Urban Area Security Initiative and the Law Enforcement Support Office. Working with the fire department, we were able to get a generator for our Emergency Operations Center, which is up at our training center. We were able, instead of that coming from our general fund, the grant allocation committee has given us money to put that generator in there. That'll save us $100,000. We're able to get these other items that'll be used for our OTAC initiative. These are items that went right to the city of Troy. We got a pickup truck. We have a Humvee, which we got as part of the Law Enforcement Support Office. This is government surplus. It comes back. We're going to fix that up and use it as one of our vehicles for the tactical support team. And we got 40 gun sights. We want our patrol rifles. That totals out $186,000. This is money that Lieutenant Gordon from the Troy Police Department was very involved with. This money is continued efficiencies that went in the form of grants and assisted all law enforcement across Oakland County, and a lot of that is housed in Troy. I'm not going to go into the detail. This is mainly items for crowd control and active shooter training, which I'm very proud that we've taken the lead on that. We have to take the lead in order to make sure things are getting done. And from a countywide perspective, we're going to have a lot of equipment that will help us if either of those necessities come up in either crowd control issues, riots, or active shooter issues. There's all the details within your document. That totals out from budget year 2011 to the current budget year, $327,000 in grants we've got. Continuing efficiencies, you're all familiar with our volunteer program. In 2010, we had no volunteers. Now we have 5 internal volunteers and 35 citizens on patrol. We've discussed that before, so I won't belabor that point. Major Case Assistance Team is a multi-jurisdictional team from all these different police departments listed here. The case in point was during the Mike's homicide. They came in and assisted us on working tips. It takes a lot of manpower to do that, a lot of personnel time. They helped us follow up on tips that generated leads, and then they helped us search the area up in Montrose, Michigan, where we were looking for the body. That assists us because we don't have to pay the personnel to do that. That's borne by the other cities that help us, and we will reciprocate if they have the need. Finally, revenues and reimbursement. In 2012, we received $210,000 plus in forfeiture money and overtime reimbursement from our cooperative with the Immigration Customs Enforcement Border Enforcement Security Team. Mr. Darling went through and said how much doing the budget is like the Super Bowl to him, spouting off acronyms just like that to cops. And the Drug Enforcement Agency. We have 1 officer in each of those 2 units, and we're able to get back that money for forfeiture and overtime reimbursement. Now I'll go into the fire department, which Chief Nelson wants to do.
Well done.
Sorry.
First, I'm going to check to make sure this room's not overcrowded. All of our budget input basically is driven by our mission statement, so we always do that first intro. To recall, when we went through our consensus items, we basically identified stabilizing the volunteer plan as a major initiative that we wanted to do. As Brian indicated, we're working to create a more substantive structure for that, but we thought it was important to indicate to the volunteers who hadn't had any type of increase in that retirement program for over 5 years that we would increase that. So basically that's 605 to 642 for future recipients only. Capital improvements was identified. We did put together an 8-year capital replacement plan for fire apparatus, and the first year of it is budgeted in the 2014 budget. We did identify a number because we have so many outposts, if you will, of buildings. We do have a number of maintenance issues with those, and we have budgeted repair and maintenance brickwork for fire stations. And Station 4, we did have a feasibility study completed for that, and you'll be hearing more about that as we move forward. Appreciation banquet, mark your calendars, April 26, 2014 will be the next one. And we have, as Tom indicated, recovered staff furlough time by 50%. So those were the priorities that had been indicated. Review of staffing. You see in 2008 we had a total of 14 career folks. We went down to 11 in 2012 and we're still at 11. And we have had a little fluctuation in our part-time folks a little bit, and which resulted in about 0.2 of an FTE reduction for 2014. On the volunteer firefighter side, we currently have 161, although we do budget for 180 every year, because our eternal hope is that we continue to recruit and introduce volunteers into the system until we get to that number. So we do budget for 180, which we did in 2014. Revenue projections, we have seen a number of increases in permits, things like that, basically driven by development and redevelopment So we anticipate for next year, just under $180,000 in revenue. Our operating fund and capital fund history. We started back in 2009, we were at about $4.5 million. Decreased considerably as we went through operating until we picked up the Medical First Responder Program from the Police Department in 2013, which kicked us back up to about $4.5 million, and at 2014 we're projecting requesting $4,678,000, which if you took the $500,000 for the First Responder Program out of there, we'd still be at like $4.1 million, which is less than what we were in 2009. Capital fluctuates quite a bit. Some of these years that we did capital that were $1 million, we combined multi-year capital to get better buying power for fire apparatus. The $1,028,000 was 2 engines that we bought in 2009, and then the same thing in 2010. Capital projects, apparatus replacement. In 2014, we're proposing to replace a heavy rescue for $450,000. We have actually adaptively reused. We actually have it in service now. The WTRY cable TV van, which was over $100,000 investment that we made back in about 2006 for community affairs. We have taken that, basically stripped it down, and are using that now to replace, I don't know, many of you may not remember, but we used to have a 1978 transit bus that was our mobile command vehicle. It was a cream puff. It only had 575,000 miles.
Just getting broke in.
But we used it for almost 30 years, and it just finally gave up. So this is considerably smaller, but it's a little bit easier to work on. But the logic is that we do need to do some things to it to make it more receptive for our uses. Fire stations, emergency generator, Station 1 is being replaced for $40,000, and brick repair at stations 1, 2, 5, and 6 for $50,000. Continued efficiency efforts. We're continuing to do everything that we're doing now, but one of the things that we want to focus on for 14 are to evaluate our permit fees. As our personnel costs continue to rise, we want to make sure that our permit fees accurately reflect the cost that it takes, what it costs to provide that service. And explore additional collaboration activities and opportunities. We do that on a continuous basis. We're constantly meeting with other fire departments to look at training. We're looking at joint responses, a number of different areas where we can collaborate with other departments to save money and become more effective.
Good evening. Tim Richneck, Public Works Director. I've got Kirk Goldenseat and Sam Lamorato here, Fleet Maintenance and our Streets and Drains, and Steve Malata, Building Operations. This is a repeat from what you've seen before, our consensus statement, and we list them down through there, and I won't spend a lot of time on that because we'll pick up on a lot of this as I go through the presentation. Department of Public Works level of staffing, and back 2008 we were at about 114. Now we're at 87. Dropped down. We, along with the other departments, have had a lot of vacancies, and you'll see that throughout the budgets for each of the divisions. You'll say, okay, why are the 2 actuals so much lower than the projected or the budgets for the future? Same answer as everybody else is given. And you can see that under the expenses on the right-hand side. Here's back from 2007. Parks revenue is collected through Recreation Department and is represented in its budget. These are the small areas that we do get some revenue: athletic field use, shelters, and special use permit fees and charges. Streets and drains revenue. Tracy and Dane's budget history. We're looking at the same expenses were low, and that's all due to personnel. Here's the history going back to 2001. It goes up and down a little bit with the weather. Recycling and refuse. Revenue last year was based on a 1.02 millage. That's going to be 1.09 with approval of the budget. This increase, and over the next 3 years, we're looking to increase the fund balance. Last year, we had 1.25% of the annual expenses. The goal is, and Tom has looked at this very closely, we need to be at 15%. So with the increase, we're looking at $108.10 for the average cost to pick up refuse at your home. I can concur with city manager. This is a great price. Being in Rochester Hills, they don't have refuse included. I pay for that extra, and it's about double what that is. It used to be even more. Refuse and recycling budget history. Most of these expense increases were values that went up because of fuel escalators and the CPI escalators that are in our contracts. You can take a look at the fund balance. Got down to actual 54,143. We didn't make much headway on that in the 2012-13, this current budget, but we're looking with that increase to bring it up to $274,000. That's about 6% of fund balance, and as I mentioned, over the next 3-year rolling budget, we would be looking at getting up to that target. Yes, sir.
Councilman Teets?
Yeah. Is there actual increase from SACRA asking for, I think you know what I'm saying, I can't, is SACRA charging the city more money, or is this simply trying to increase from 6% fund balance to a goal of 15%?
Well, SACRA is charging us more based on the CPI and fuel index and their costs that are associated with their operation of it. But we're also looking to add back and increase that fund balance through the increase to the 1.09. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
A lot of questions. Why is there a need to increase it from 6 to 15? What's the logic behind that? To just have a buffer in case you need to spend fund balance?
Right, well, again, the idea is that our expenditures are about $4.5 million a year. Again, with the contracts that we have out there, and I think Tim can talk more with the fuel escalators and that they can shift, and we need to be able to respond to those expenditures, basically, yes.
And that hopefully will, as we all try to do in all our budgeting at home and here, try to keep an even keel. You don't want to be 1 year increasing everything, then the next year down low because of the economy and what happens with recyclable products and how much material we pick up and dispose of. So that's just a good financial practice to have a fund balance of this sort for this particular business.
It significantly decreased. If we had a history up there that significantly decreased, again, going down to 59,000 or 1% is, I think we want more stability than that in that fund, because that would be a deficit fund balance.
Councilman Henderson?
So last year we had an increase in the budget, correct? And this year we're asking for another increase in the budget. And they also have the ability, SACRA does, to increase what they charge each household based on the contract that they have. Is that essentially what I'm hearing, or no?
To charge us.
A fuel surcharge or whatever?
Well, there's
Is
a
that what
fuel
you're-
surcharge that is in the contract of Tringali Sanitation and also a CPI. Also in Viola, who has a contract to haul from the transfer center to the landfills. So there's an escalator in that SACRA has to account for, and that's charged to us. Because they handle some of the contracts for distribution of that material from their facility to the landfill. So that's where some of the other escalator clause comes in to that contract.
So if that clause was not in the contract, that our fund balance would be higher just because we had that increase last year, correct?
But
The
if we
escalator
didn't
wasn't
have
in
that in the
place.
contract, the contract would probably look differently, and you would have, incremental increases that, may be higher or lower. I mean, it's hard to say, because this is the way these contracts were negotiated. So I can't say that it would be lower.
Right.
And again, it's safe to, these were millage increase really proposed last year, so there's no change to those than what we proposed the same thing last year.
And there's approximately 3 years left in the 10-year contract. There is a 10-year renewal with the vendors, but that's something, 2 years from now, we'll be looking very closely and seeing what, the market will bear and whether the recommendation by the soccer board would be to go back out to bid or, to look at what we have and continue with it.
But if you could just say what you just said, though, this was proposed in last year's budget for this year, in the 3-year budget.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's just a reiteration of
What we did last year.
Correct.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming.
Just to clarify, you're proposing the millage to go up this year, but it was predicted last year that you were going to be proposing this. Is that
Yes,
what
Mr.
you're
Fleming,
saying?
yes. When we passed the 3 budgets, the budget last year, this was part of that.
Anticipating this.
Yes.
Councilwoman McGinnis.
Have we ever, I think I know the answer to this question, but I just want to get reassurance. Have we ever been in a position where we didn't have a millage that covered the cost of what our expenses were for refuse?
No, this is the closest that we've got.
The closest that we've got.
And historically, 7 years ago, we went out as a group with SACRA. Instead of bidding the contract for refuse collection ourselves, we put all the communities together, went out to bid. We were able to reduce the rates for Troy by 18%. The goal was we wanted a 10% reduction across the board for all the communities. We were able to do that, and we're very successful. But at the same time, then that millage was reduced, and there was thought that we should not reduce it or reduce it less so that we didn't get ourselves into a situation where we didn't have fund balance. Well, you had a situation where the city was financially strapped, 2008, 2009. A decision was made to lower that, and that's why our fund balance, got to this point. We're looking to build that back up to what is reasonable. Any other questions on it? Water and sewer revenues. Water usage had dropped the last several years. Folks just didn't have the water or the money to spend on watering their lawns. People were losing their jobs and having reduction in their revenue. So that has turned the corner a little bit, and we're predicting that we're going to increase that by about 15,000 million cubic feet, up to 530,000 million cubic feet of sales for this coming year. Here's the history on the rates. Even though there's a projected 10.5% rate from Detroit, and we still don't know what we're going to get charged on sewer because we haven't got those numbers from the county yet. It's a little late for them to get them to us. We usually have them by the 15th of April. They say they're coming, but we're confident that they're going to be in a range that's the same as what Detroit is passing on to them. But that being said, we're looking at holding the rate that we charge residents for water and sewer to the same as it was for 2012-13. And you can see that flat line on the bottom chart, how water and sewer has fluctuated depending on, what capital needs were and those things with the county and Detroit. This slide's going to show you our expenses, our revenues, and then probably the most interesting number that you'll look at is this one here, our working capital. There's, under the sewer, there's 3 items that working capital has significant note to it. One is that our sewer system was built majority in the 70s and 80s. Sewer systems will function fairly well for about 50 years. We're going to come up on 50 years here in the next 5 to 10 years on the majority of that. Sewers are more expensive to repair than water mains. 2 reasons: they're deeper in the ground and the material costs are greater. Now, you can repair some of those systems through lining and other technology, but that's one of the areas where many communities go along happy-go-lucky and nobody sees it, and all of a sudden they're in trouble. So that's part 1 to that. Part 2 is we have $10 million in sewer that we have to get billed, and there's 4 to 5 months from the time they actually use it till we can turn around and bill people. So we got to have working capital to be able to function. And the third item, which should lose me, is, and it shouldn't, and Steve and Deb can jump in on this and give his expertise too. Back in 1989, in the Evergreen Farmington system, we had some backups that went into 18 homes. Since that point in time, and Evergreen Farmington is run by Oakland County Drains, and since that time, we've been working with them to try to resolve those issues. We've spent some money putting lining, manhole rehab, and doing sewer monitoring and metering inside our community to see how much we can squeeze out and not put so much material in there. But there's been issues with the Evergreen Farmington interceptor, which is their main sewer, and we're looking at between a $7 and $10 million repair and upgrade to that system at this point. It hasn't been set in stone exactly what that project's going to be, but we've been attending meetings for years, and the county has done some things. They haven't been sitting on their laurels, but they've done some things with manholes that they're looking at restructuring, taking and putting some detention in, also some relief sewers, which are sewers that parallel the current sewers that would carry some more of that capacity so we don't have backups. Because over the last 20 years, we've been monitoring the manholes for the county. We've been pumping that material into the river when we get up to a certain level so that we don't flood the homes in Troy. There's federal mandates that we get this corrected, and we're working through that process.
And next year, we should have details on what this project is going to be, and along with the cost. It won't be built next year, but we'll have the details of what the project will actually be, and then we'll move forward towards implementing that project in the years after that.
And if we look down here at the water fund, we have the same situation. We have 4 months where we have water that we bill, that we don't collect, and also water main replacements. Water and sewer capital projects. Here's funds by year, and when we do capital bill review, all of that. Same thing here. The projects he shows for water and sewer will come at that time. Proposed projects, Evergreen Farmington, you'll see a lot of that for metering and the districts and and some just various projects throughout. Scattered water, that's all water main replacement based on, breaks and age of pipes and other history. Building operations revenue, this is a repeat slide. With $1.04 square foot for all the departments. Court lease is $50,000. Last time we met, I wasn't aware of, when that lease ends. There's 3 more years on it, so 2 years from now, we'll take a look at that, see what the county's interest is in continuing to work with the city and have the court in our buildings. Building operations, here's their budget. They have a small working capital of $375,000. Fleet maintenance revenue comes from lease vehicles to all the divisions. Lease rates are based on the type of vehicle or equipment. There's a schedule that the state has, they provide us. Our rates are well below those rates on every piece of equipment that we have out there. In addition, we do have 13 outside agencies that we insource. Fleet maintenance budget history. And you can see how things increased, and then with the reduction of staff throughout the community, we had to reduce those things, and that's reflected in the budget. Department of Public Works moving forward with efficiencies. We go back to the information on the first slide, and what we're looking at is technology here, replacing laptops with iPads. They're easier to use, they're quicker and more efficient. Smartphones, we're continuing to put those out to our field staff because they get immediate notifications and can garner information off of them, from, in particular, like the SCADA system. We're got 3 more stations to move on to SCADA, reduce the phone line expenditures on an annual basis at what phone lines are, landlines are today. We're going to save about $192,000 every year moving forward by getting them off those landlines. Building operations is continuing to monitor all of our energy through their energy management system. Example, fleet maintenance is looking to purchase a loader, and we have a scale at the yard, and everybody going in and out has to weigh in on the scale. There's a loader that we're going to purchase with technology on it, where when it hits a scoop of salt, gravel, debris that we're hauling out, it weighs it, registers it in. We don't have to go to the scale. We're going to save time for all of our staff to go through that process, and it also should help us track our inventory. Particularly because, like salt, yards to weight ratio and some of the stuff, if they filled the truck up with fuel, when they reloaded, it just makes it a little fuzzy, and so this will give us some accuracies. Communication. Fleet now sends out emails to folks, when a piece of equipment has been repaired and what the status is, because they don't have to wait to call somebody, when they're working. They'll get it whenever that shift people come back in, and they know, where they're at with their service on their vehicles. Kirk Vogensiep has purchased a whiteboard. If you ever listen to what the school systems are doing with whiteboards, you can do all kinds of drawings, put charts, put maps. We'll be able to pass on this information to the residents, like if we're doing a snow plowing operation, we'll be able to put a map up there that people can look at and say, okay, here I see where the city has plowed, where the city hasn't plowed. They can track that. We can do that all through, Facebook and other technologies that I'm not as well versed at as Kurt is. We're looking at revenue increases, special permitting for field usage, and cost reductions. Fleet has reduced their operation of vehicles and equipment by 15%. They do usage studies, and with just the sheer numbers of staff that we have, some of that material is not used anymore. And so it's been taken away. And library. Kathy? Any final questions?
Hello, everyone. everyone. I'm Kathy Russ, I'm the library director, and with me here tonight is Philip Quick, the library assistant director. He's going to talk to you about some of the efficiencies that we have over at the library. But first, I'm going to talk to you about the budget. So what we have on our first slide are the consensus statements, and when I developed the library's budget, I kept these firmly before me, and also really tried to keep in front of me your 12 objectives, the objectives that you developed with the city manager. There's not a whole lot that the library can do to help with roads, but with everything else that you have developed, as much as the library can assist with that, I feel very strongly that it is important that we support you and help you get where you want to go and where the city wants to go and where our residents want to go. So those two factors, plus of course the goal of aggressively implementing the recommendations from the library's strategic plan. So to that end, the major change with the library's budget is the inclusion of 3 full-time staff members. First, a technology librarian who will help us implement the recommendations from the strategic plan as they relate to technology. To summarize, people want more and more and more E. Anything E is very important. So there is that position. The teen librarian, who I believe you've met, she has done marvelous things with the Teen Advisory Board, energized that group, has done a tremendous job doing outreach to the schools and implementing a lot of programs that we just didn't have in the past. She has really done a great job in mobilizing that group of kids, and we're going to have her do even more, and again, help you interact with the schools. Last but not least, the marketing coordinator. This position, the person in this position will help increase the library's visibility in the community, help publicize the programs and services. And this one is dear to my heart, help the Troy Library develop a brand, because a brand will help us with our marketing pieces we can tailor them to the business community, to new residents, to the schools, to various groups in the community, and help really make that library visible. I have so many ideas, and I'm so pleased that I finally have a person to help me do what I want to do. So the staffing levels for the 2013 budget are 9 full-time staff members. This is an increase from 6, and our part-time staffing level stays the same at 66. So again, the addition of these new positions will help the library move forward with implementing the recommendations from the strategic plan. And if this budget meets your approval and passes muster, I am so excited, I am so happy. I think you're going to be thrilled with what we are able to do for the library and for this community, and give the residents of the community the library that it deserves. So the library's budget this year is balanced. The library will be bringing in $3.2 million in revenue, and you can see how that breaks down. For donations, I put variable. Usually the library brings in about $2,000 to $3,000 in donations, and with the addition of the marketing person, I hope to really ramp that up to bring in a lot more. I didn't factor in a lot of donations into that balanced budget because I believe in being conservative, but I really expect that number, that $2,000 to $3,000 number is going to increase, especially being able to have marketing pieces that we can pass out in the community. The expenditures will match the revenues. Again, $3.2 million, and you can see how that breaks down with personnel, supplies, service charges, and the collection. The supplies and service charges stay roughly the same. The personnel budget obviously increased with the inclusion of these 3 positions. The collection budget was reduced just a little bit so we could allow for the changes that Mr. Kishnick recommended as far as furlough time and so forth. But I think it's very doable. In terms of capital projects for the coming fiscal year, I have requested $20,000 to really renovate or restructure the circulation desk that is right at the entrance to the library. It comes out in sort of a U shape, and what I'd like to do is cut that back to make it straight across. It will allow for the inclusion of another self-checkout machine should we decide to do that, possibly a patron self-registration station, but more importantly to me, it will pick up about 200 square feet at the entrance to the library. In our strategic plan, it was noted many times that that area is basically the clusters where traffic all comes together. And to do this renovation, it will help us with wayfinding. It will help with signage. We're hoping perhaps to put in like a welcome desk or have a concierge type of thing to really make the library more user-friendly for people. The work is going to be done by our building operations department, who are very wonderful, and I'm looking forward to that an awful lot. I wanted to bring up for the following fiscal year, not this fiscal year, but for 2014-15, we're proposing the drive-up materials return. This is absolutely far and away the most requested service by patrons. I have truly thousands of comment cards and emails and requests to put this service in. We got about a third of the way into this project in 2009. We were able to redo our parking lot to make accommodation for the materials return, but we never implemented the actual materials return. So this again was recommended in the strategic plan, and I'm hoping that by next year we will be ready to go with it. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Quick to talk about the efficiencies that we're working on at the library.
Thank you, Kathy. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor and Council. In terms of continued efficiencies as we move forward at the library, we will continue to reevaluate every open part-time position and determine how best to fill that position. We ask every department head to justify the position and not just to continue to do business, continue to fill positions because those are the way things have always been done. We're working with the city finance and IT departments to implement debit credit card acceptance. As you all know, as our society becomes more cashless, this is actually the second most requested service after the book drop that Kathy mentioned. We believe this will improve services to the residents, and we also believe this will enhance revenue. We will continue to grow the library's volunteer program. Currently, we have 118 active volunteers. Just a little bit of background. This volunteer program really, although we've always had some volunteers at the library, this program really took off in 2010 when we reduced our staff by 30% and had no choice but to use volunteers to do many of the routine jobs that staff would do. Many of these volunteers are Troy youth who are getting credit for honors programs or other programs that they do to help out at the library. And I'd just like to mention that the council, the mayor and council members will be able to meet many of these volunteers as you'll all be invited to our volunteer appreciation lunch this coming May. We will continue to work with the Friends of the Troy Public Library. I'm sure all of you know of the Friends. We certainly couldn't do what we do without them. They contribute enormously in terms of money for services, for programs, for equipment, and they certainly deserve our thanks. We will continue to explore partnerships with the community, with patrons, vendors, businesses, etc. This past year, we developed many partnerships with many local businesses, Barnes & Noble, Noodles & Company, Dairy Queen. Last September, we started a library card program with local businesses so that when you showed your library card, when residents showed their library cards to some local businesses, they would get discounts. We're going to continue that in September. We will continue to increase our partnerships, in particular with the $65,000 Smart Money grant that we received. We'll be partnering with local colleges, local businesses, and local financial institutions. We will continue to investigate self-service options where possible while ensuring friendly and personal service. Over the past year, the council approved the purchase of 5 self-checkout machines, as Kathy mentioned. We've rolled those out over the last year. At this point, they are responsible for about 40% of all the checkout business that we do at the library. This number increases every day as our public gets used to them. This has freed up a lot of staff from the burden of checking out 1.5 million items. And as we free up staff who formerly did that with equipment, as we free up the staff, we've redeployed them to other projects that the library needs. And finally, the new library technology, which we're proposing in this budget, will explore ways to put technology to work for both the library staff and the patrons to avoid duplicating resources. That person will examine formats, information delivery, and how best to meet the needs of our residents. As an example, we are looking at things like, we know we have music lovers download and stream material. We're looking at vendors who will provide this to the library, downloading and streaming music, so that we can start to replace our CD collection as we put more of our budget into programs like this. This will greatly reduce or greatly change the amount of space we need for physical items at the library, and will allow us to put that space towards other uses like increased study space and other things that we desperately need. Recreation.
The proposed budget, recreation, the proposed budget addresses some of the conclusions from the previous council study sessions. These include increased programming, acceptance of the cost-neutral mandate, evaluating successful programs, bringing some of those back, and certainly evaluating the capital improvement needs. Thanks. Recreation budget. You will see increases in all areas in the proposed budget on revenues, recreation, community center, seniors, and miscellaneous revenues from the current budget to the proposed budget. On the expense side, you will see slight increases in recreation, increase in senior activities, and a very slight decrease in the community center. Cost neutral in both year-end and proposed, though the current budget shows just short of cost neutral. In addition to cost neutral, the proposed budget shows an offset of the administration of $134,000. Cost for the department in the net cost for the department in the proposed budget is approximately $600,000. Next. Okay, staffing overview. Basically, it has stayed the same or will stay the same. You might see 2012-13 shows 5.6 full-time people. 2013-14 shows 6. That reflects a true allocation of where those hours were. There is no additional person or people. Community center capital, we have proposed, as you can see, the last few years, current budget, last couple of years, there has been no capital funds for the community center. We are showing or proposing $221,000 for the next budget year. Significant in that is $156,000 of that for painting of the interior of the community center on areas or in areas that have not been painted since we opened. Next. Okay, on to the enterprise funds. I will do for the recreation, I'll do the 2 enterprise funds tonight rather than Wednesday because they're part of the recreation budget. You will see in talking Sylvan Glen first, there's a slight increase from the current budget to the proposed budget and an increase in expenses primarily due to capital, but also wages. Fund total shows an expense over revenue of just over 27,000. 242,000 of that expense though is capital. Sanctuary Lake shows an increase in revenue, proposed increase in revenue of 112,000 and a proposed decrease in expenses of 113,000. Fund total for Sanctuary Lake is 382,000 expense over revenue, and of that 671,000 or 670,900 is proposed debt. Total fund is 410,000 expense over revenue. That's the 2 golf courses combined. With of that fund, 913,000 of it is capital and debt. For the coming year, we have, although you will see capital improvement in the 2013 budget, 102,000 was proposed or as capital. There are no allocations or there's no funding that is being allocated, no capital projects this year. Next year, 242,000 is being proposed, and primarily that's in equipment, rotary mowers, and triplex mowers, which I think is about 224,000, in what turns out to be 6 pieces of equipment. Next, Aquatic Center. Revenues. There is a slight decrease in revenues for the proposed budget year, and a slight increase in expenses. The fund total is $48,300 proposed for next year. $58,000 of that is capital funding. Those capital projects that are being proposed have all to do with pumps. There are 8 major pumps, or 8 big pumps at the Aquatic Center. 4 of those, at least 4 of those, we are intending to either rebuild or replace in the next budget year. They have not been rebuilt or replaced since opening this will be our 22nd year. Staffing at the Aquatic Center, and I should note that they will be rebuilt or replaced based on what the contractor determines is necessary. Staffing overview, there are no full-time hours allocated to the Aquatic Center. There are part-time hours, and 2014 is budgeted with being fully open, having no days closed. Likely going to be not a complete 100-plus day season without any closed hours at all. So we are budgeting that way. Next. We're cognizant of Council's conclusions and are spending efforts to implement those conclusions. As was mentioned earlier tonight, we are currently planning additional programming, Dog Day event in the park, summer special event at Bowling Park, family event at the Aquatic Center, dog swim at the Aquatic Center at the end of the year. Some of these are events or programs that we've had in the past, and some of them are sort of revised and different events that we have. And I would say lastly, or I will say lastly, that although the Nature Center and Nature Society are not reflected in the recreation budget, the Recreation Department of staff are liaison with the Nature Society. And their agreement, the agreement, as you heard a few weeks ago at a council meeting, expires at the end of June this year. We're talking and obviously working on a new agreement. And in that agreement, the Nature Society has requested a $50,000 allocation from the city to the Nature Society to further their mission, operation, and goals. Expenses, it doesn't reflect in here, but it is in the general fund budget. The expenses for the Nature Center, including that $50,000, is about 80, a little bit, about 80, 85, 88,000, including that 50. That's it. Questions?
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming.
And thank you, Brent.
Yeah. Carol, there was some discussion at one point about the sprinkler system at Sylvia and Glenn, the irrigation system. I know we talked about maybe the future having to spend some capital there. I didn't see anything reflected. Is that in the later on?
It is. As you know, there's a capital improvement plan for 6 years, and it is in, I think it is in year 2 or 3 that we're looking at doing it. We thought that this was a better way to do this, and it's a risk, but that's how we planned it.
When does the bond debt expire for the golf course? Do we know?
Around 22.
Around 22?
I can double check this right here.
Originally it was.
It should be on the original schedule. So, I'm sorry, 28. The same time as the original bonds were, 28. So I see it, A, B, and C that expire in 22.
Any other questions?
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming.
See, the community center is almost cost neutral. You know, we're close. Do you foresee an opportunity for that ever to be a profit center, or are we going to be just content to try to get the cost neutral?
If you look at the community center, it's from the actual, or the estimated year end, it will be a cost neutral. Whether it is a profit center, that is not how we have spent our time looking at operating. So without further analysis, I couldn't answer it.
I think we're going to take a recess for 5 minutes. And Carol Anderson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was trying to get things on a roll, and I failed to introduce three staff people that are here with me tonight. So not that I forget you, because I could not do anything without you, but Ryan Gould, who is Aquatics Fitness Coordinator, Elaine Bowe, Recreation Supervisor, and Scott Mercer, also Recreation Supervisor. They were certainly part of this whole getting this budget together, so thank you for that, and I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ready?
Mr. Kishnick? What's next?
We're ready, let's keep.
All right, let's go. All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm here representing the Economic and Community Development Division. Also, Steve Van Jett, City Engineer, will speak, and Brent Sabanat, Planning Director. First, I want to go through our consensus statements, which included review the Zucker report, assistance in filling positions, pay and benefits to attract and retain employees, draft effective communication strategy, which is a little more related to community affairs, long-term contracts with consultants that are beneficial to the city. Most of our departments do utilize consultants, engineering, planning, and building inspections. And finally, work with IT to enhance Flex Online training and fee payments, and with that includes credit card payments. Just a quick statement. In this budget, we include for the Troy Historical Village $50,000 for capital and maintenance costs, and we're contractually obligated to do that. Also included in this is a $100,000 request for operational support. I would also note there are some other nominal funds included in the budget. Floating through, where's Kurt? For maintenance and garbage pickup and things of that nature, which we've had the budget, because the first year we didn't budget any money at all to do that, and we're on that. I'll move quickly to building inspections. What's the important point that you would see here? The effects of the crash, here we're at the low point in the number of building permit revenue, but it is slowly build and build. But what is really interesting at the same time, our departmental budget costs have gone down. So I think what this really demonstrates in this situation, utilizing Safe Build has been very, very cost effective, and we are also receiving very good service. And Safe Build continually provide surveys to the customers, and they get a 99% satisfaction results. Really quick, we have 0.3 full-time, 35% full-time employee, and that's Mitch Grusnick. He's our certified building inspector. And no part-time employees. And Mitch Grusnick also works in the planning department as a code enforcement officer. Here is the budget, and this is that we noted that those permit revenues were increasing dramatically. And what we can show on here is that the existing budget, the amended budget, is 1.146 million, and you notice that we're estimating that we're going to be up to 1.3, 1.4 million. What that means is that we're releasing a lot more permits. And what's the beautiful arrangement with that is that that really doesn't cost us in order, because 75% of the eligible permit costs go to pay their fee, and then we retain 25% of those. And moving forward with building inspections, we're going to purchase the online portal from BSNA. We have to pay a fee to actually maintain it, and that's so that builders can submit permits online, and we're moving towards that. We're completing the digitization of existing records and plans. I believe this next year we'll totally digitize all of the building records that exist, and then keep up with the ones that come in day to day. We'll also, in accordance with information technology, to implement online credit card payments, and also with finance. And I think a really important one here, which you'll hear from Brent, is that we'll continue to create an environment for investment through fast, fair, and predictable development decisions. And lastly, all of our division functions will coordinate together to deliver that environment for investment. I'm comfortable with Steve Adet, City Engineer.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Here tonight with me is Bill Hootery, Deputy City Engineer and Traffic Engineer. And at the break, he said, you've got 2 slides, make the most of it. I'm going to try to make the least of it. Because you're going to be hearing a lot more from me and Bill on Wednesday night. As you may recall from prior presentation, from 2005, engineering staff has been reduced by 50%. I believe we are at an optimized staff level currently. We're a full-service department. We can do design, survey, inspection, construction, administration. We can do all of that. But if we lose one employee in any of those areas, it becomes difficult, if not impossible, to function in that area. And so we have consultants to fill in for us. Even if, when we are fully staffed, we do have the need for consultants because we just have so much capital improvement work to do. So you can see our staffing level from last year is the same. It's 11.25 full-time. The 0.25 is a GIS analyst, and we share that with 3 other departments, so our budget gets hit for 25% of the GIS analysts. And IT and water and sewer gets the other 75%. As you may recall, also, our primary activity is is capital improvement projects, the design and construction and administration of the capital improvement program, mainly water, sewer, roads, and drains. And for that, it generates our largest portion of income, which is $1.4 million. Those are for primarily water, sewer, road projects, for which if we didn't do this work in-house, we would be paying a consultant to do it, and would be paying a higher price. We also generate revenue from what's known as the Telecommunications or Metro Act. We have a minor amount of revenue from various permits that we issue and administer. So our total revenue is almost 90% of our expenditures. Our expenditures for next year are proposed at $1.89 million. We're almost, in terms of revenue, almost 90% of that expense is covered. There is an increase from last year, but that is mainly due to inflationary factors. We have no increases in capital or supplies or any of that sort. The increase is strictly inflationary. Moving forward, as you may recall, I mentioned that my last presentation is we are down 1 inspector. We have 2 part-time inspectors. It makes it difficult to function with that. We are in the queue for replacing 1 full-time inspector, and we hope to do that soon. And we also are working towards retaining staff. And staff has a tremendous amount of institutional and infrastructure knowledge that we hope to maintain. And we'll do what we can in order to maintain and keep our staff. An efficient use of consultants, and not only consultants, but our own staff, balancing what we do with the need for consultants to help us do it so that we have the most optimal mix of doing the work most effectively, most efficiently, and at the lowest cost possible. And over the years, on average, since we optimized the department and we track our costs and our efficiency, on average, we're able to save approximately $200,000 per year doing the work with a full-service engineering department as opposed to a consultant taking over all of that work. So we feel pretty good about ourselves, and we hope to continue. And we have a large capital program that we're going to be talking about on Wednesday, and Bill will have the lion's share of that presentation on Wednesday. Next up is Frank.
Thanks, Steve. By my math, to keep us on track, I've got 12 and a half seconds. I'm going to try my best.
With that 5-minute break, I think.
We've actually, the planning budget is actually 3 separate budgets. We've got the lion's share, the largest is the administrative cost of running, staffing, running the planning department office. You see the $788,500 is allocated for that. We're also the liaison to 2 boards, one the planning commission, the other is the board of zoning. It's now the zoning board of appeals. That was changed 2 years ago. They both receive compensation for providing that service. So they've each got a budget. When you combine all 3, you see the budget at about $804,000. One thing I should note that this was put together, and quite recently we've had some discussion internally with city management. The Planning Commission has a training and education budget of $2,500 per year, and that we've determined that is not adequate to keep the Planning Commission trained. So we're proposing to update this this number and also update the draft document to increase that number from $2,500 per year for education training to $6,000 per year education training. In terms of staffing, we were dramatically restructured 2010, 2011. We 3 planning positions were eliminated, but at the same time, we inherited responsibility of code enforcement, so we picked up 4 people. So it was some juggling, and now we've got 3.65 full-time employees. That 6.65 is Mitch Gruznik, who's one of our inspectors. The other 35% of his time is spent as a building official for the city. We've got 1.8 part-time employees, and we've got a planning consultant that has part-time hours that assists us in providing service. In terms of efficiencies, we're in the process of starting the review of the ZUC report. We're going to update as needed and implement any efficiencies that are identified in the review. If workload does increase, we've got the planning consultant that we can utilize to assist us in the workload. We're in the process of reviewing our application fees to make sure they're in line with the costs of processing applications. Mark mentioned creating an environment for investment. That's become pretty much our mantra, is through fast, fair, predictable decision-making. We work according with building, community affairs, engineering, economic development, fire, to provide the environment for investment in the city of Troy. We're a small department, but we play a vital role in providing, creating that environment for investment. Thank you.
Yeah, Tom and I wanted to make a quick comment going back to the building inspections. I made a note that the the permit revenues was higher than we expected, and I showed that we projected that we were going to have a higher budget. And what Tom wanted me to note is that there will be a budget amendment coming forward in the future for that.
Keep in mind, revenues are also higher than we expected, but when it comes to the state, they want you to come under the appropriated budget amounts for expenditures.
Well, looks like I'm the only thing between you and getting back home, so without further ado, we'll see if we can wrap this up. I'm going to talk real briefly then about administration, which is really what we're calling administration is encompassing basically the 9 remaining departments that we haven't talked about quite yet. First, with our consensus. First consensus item was to review the ICMA study and determine if recommended staffing levels are congruent with those levels recommended by the ICMA. I'm happy to say that our staffing levels for administration are at or below ICMA recommendations. Second, our consensus was to identify and pursue programs and policies that attract and retain qualified employees. Again, it looks like we're reiterating a common message throughout this presentation that we have a proposal in this budget, the elimination of unpaid time requirements. In other words, you're required to work, but we're not required to pay you. So those have been eliminated. Reduce required furlough hours that were a concession by employees. Establish up to a 1% merit increase. Establish a $500 in one-time incentive. And establish an employee appreciation program or budget for employee appreciation type program. Additionally, the consensus was to emphasize training and cross-training. When you're living by the ICMA recommendations, that is a normal part of life. We are budgeted to really kind of our bare bones, so we have to cross-train. Part of that. Some of the examples that I have is that with purchasing, you only have two purchasing people in that department. They have to be able to train, cross-train, or perform each other's duties in a variety of ways. Both assessors can both do residential and commercial property, including audits. Along with that, assessing and treasury, because of their proximity to each other, have cross-trained in each of their functions because they both have kind of peak times and they're able to assist each other. Also part of that in the finance department, accounts payable clerks can do payroll functions type clerks can do AP, general ledger can do receipts and those type of functions. So again, those are just a couple of the many type of cross-training things that we've done. Part of that was the training budget too. Again, in 2013, we were budgeted about $36,000 in training. We've increased that a bit to $49,000. Again, this is for all 9 departments. Continue evaluation of health insurance cost savings. Part of what we've done is we've contracted an employee benefits consultant, Gallagher & Associates, which is no cost to the city. Part of their compensation is part of the premiums that we have to pay into our health providers. They have a pool of funds that those type of consultants draw off of. We also evaluate the employee-employer costs related to PA 152, and I know we've talked about that earlier, and we've done some analysis in that area. Finally, provide suggestions in conducting a true comparison of legal services, starting with prosecuting attorney, and that has been initiated. Let's talk about the overall position history. Again, in 2008, we had 60.5 full-time employees. In 2013, we're at 47.75 full-time employees, and in 2014, we're actually reducing another employee. This is a reduction in staffing of almost 13%, or excuse me, almost 13 full-time equivalents, or about 20% overall. So that's a significant reduction in staffing. Also to note on here, again, we've eliminated the risk management position and that we've reallocated those responsibilities. Even though we've eliminated the position, the responsibilities still stay there, so we've allocated that between our human resources, our finance, purchasing, and attorney departments. Let's talk about costs real quick. Again, overall, in 2012, we had about $7.2 million. In 2013, we're estimating about $7.8 million. Our budget is about $7.8 million, or actually a reduction from the 2013 budget of $8 million, of a reduction of about 9.6%. So real quick, I'll just talk about some of the significant ones in here. The city manager budget did increase 9.91%. Again, we talked about some of the personnel incentives, but more importantly, some of that's in this is a $50,000 increase for community promotions that was identified as one of our top 12. We've also incorporated a $10,000 for the employee appreciation that we talked about earlier, and another $5,000 for training. Treasury is worth noting in that Treasury is down 22%, and that is, in one word, tax refunds. Our tax refunds were about $594,000 in 2013. We've gone through this big MT tax tribunals. And so in 2014, that's been significantly reduced to about 280,000. Finance, again, we talked about, we got rid of the risk manager and also a part-time interim controller. And instead of the interim controller, we've actually promoted, flattened our organization, and have one of our staff as the accounting manager, Ms. Lisa Burnham, and she's doing a fantastic job. So it allowed us not to only save money, but also flatten the organization, still receiving extremely well service. I think the next one I want to talk about is human resources, and if I can have Peggy talk a little about human resources, and then turn it over to Gert, our nice captain.
Sure. HR went up about 87,000. Close to 37,000 of that, Tom referenced HR being one of the departments that absorbed some of the risk management functions. And we hired it's a 0.4 full-time equivalent administrative aide who is taking on the safety and workers' comp functions, absorbing that portion of what risk management did. And then we've allocated $50,000 for what was mentioned earlier, to retain a recruitment retention specialist. It's possibly going to be someone who's outsourced to not only help with recruitment and retention, but to help sell Troy as an employer of choice. So, and with that, I'll give it to you.
Apparently, information technology is the only department that has any capital expenditures in the administrative group, so I just want to cover those. In the past, we've done a lot of upgrading and replacement of application software, so now the budget is going to reflect more of infrastructure replacement. In two areas, we're going to focus on replacing some aging equipment and supporting our virtual environment. For the aging equipment, we have a server which was actually donated to us or given to us by Dell in 2007, and we use that as a testing server, and we've come to rely on it. We actually also use it for disaster recovery, and we've kind of outgrown it, so we're looking to replace that. We also have an uninterruptible power supply that we bought about 10 years ago that also needs to be replaced, and it can be downsized because we actually have less equipment relying on it. And then as far as the virtual environment, that in City Hall we have 2 servers that actually host about 35 virtual servers, so we really rely on it for a lot of applications. And so what we want to do is add a redundant switch because all of the data resides on a storage area network. And so if that one switch goes down, then we're basically out of business, so we want to add more redundancy to that network. We also want to purchase some software. It's VMware vSphere standard software, and basically that gives us some more management tools for that virtual environment. One of the key things that it has is something called Storage vMotion, which allows us to actually move data around and do some maintenance without bringing the system down. So the total of that's about $46,000.
Thank you, Gert. And finally, let's talk about our continued efficiencies. I think you've heard through several different presentations tonight. Online payment services are certainly desired, and we are diligent. We have a team put together, and we're diligently looking at the options because there's a few of them out there of how to deliver that service. Kind of congruent with that is the credit card acceptance request, again, by our residents at several of our outlets, including the library, which I think, finally, expand the use of our P-cards, and that's basically paying bills with our P-cards, and we actually get rebate credits back by using that. So we want to try and expand that more if we can by around $250,000 to try and capture some of those rebate incentives. We want to expand the use of our mobile devices, thank you, Gert, and some different areas in that through some of the presentations that you've seen tonight. We eliminated the risk management position and allocated those responsibilities to other departments we talked about. Again, continue the use of our mitten system, which is our procurement system, how we advertise, again, on a national and local level of services that the city desires to procure. The reduction of tax rebates, again, we talked about that was a significant reduction in tax, but I don't know if it's efficient, but it's certainly less cost as we go forward, we hope, to keep that. And then finally, expand the use of our document imaging system. Again, we spend a considerable amount of time and money in the investment of technology to make us effective and efficient, and it's the training and implementation of those type of programs that we see as the future in delivering cost-effective services to our residents. That's it for.
Mr. Kishnick, this is the time for questions and answers.
Any questions, any answers?
If we could just ask council to limit the questions to the presentation this evening and not kind of go off into some issues that might be brought up on Wednesday, such as the 3-year budget. So who's got the first question? I guess it'll be me. I just have to assume that you feel, now that you've been here for 3 years, or it seems like that.
It's been 3 years of work.
You feel very comfortable knowing the budget and the personnel that are being requested at this time. You feel comfortable with the allocation of personnel at this point and the fund balance being where it is because of future projections. Those would, it's not really a question, but I have to assume that you feel comfortable with the presentation.
Well, absolutely. But let me back up, because if you look at your budgets from previous years and the work that was done maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and you look at the projections, you look at the estimates, you look at the budgets, and then look at the actuals, and for the time, they were very well done. And they were very cognizant of the impending issue that could have really been catastrophic in Troy. And so you should be, this council and the previous councils and administration should be commended for the work that they did and the time and effort they put into those, the numbers. And so going forward, as I opened up, we try to be very, as a group, as a team, we try to be very incremental, very conservative to make sure that Troy continues to rebalance and stay on a very positive track as we look at this on a regular basis going forward. So I think the personnel requests are, there are several additional personnel requests that could be considered. But given the time and where we're at today and what we've looked retrospectively and what we're looking forward, it seems very wise and prudent to put forth what we did.
Councilwoman McGinnis.
I have 2 questions. One is for you, City Manager Kishnick. I know we've talked about the $500 bonus, but I don't know if it was specifically outlined in your 5-page letter. So I just wanted to make sure if that's something, I know it's been on the slides, I know it's been in our discussions, but you did a good job of kind of outlining things for us.
If I omitted that, it should definitely be in there. It was we try to take more of a comprehensive approach, very small though, with the 1%, the 500, so there wasn't a cumulative effect with the 500, but it definitely is part of our proposal, and it is represented in the numbers.
Okay, I think maybe it was just.
I probably wrote it in really small letters.
Or if it was called something else, I didn't know if it had a name or an act. My other question would actually be a question about the water and sewer fund versus the refuse fund, and I'm just kind of trying to figure out the best way to summarize this, because we're talking about increasing the rate for the refuse fund in order to build up our fund balance. But then we were also talking about the water and sewer fund, where we know the cost is going to go up, but we've made a decision not to pass that cost on to the consumer. So I'm wondering how we differentiate between the two of those.
Yeah,
I'm just not
two
sure
things.
the answer is clear.
The equity, the working capital in the sewer and water fund is healthy, and they're projecting more water usage, so more sales, to make up that revenue versus raising rates. There's always 2 variables, right? There's There's consumption and there's rate. And those, and the variability and on the water sewer is talking about consumption and selling more water. And
So
sometimes they sell sewer.
There's a healthier fund that can really
Correct.
absorb something that could be really detrimental to our residents. I know we've had, with some of the rates have changed and some of the different things that we've dealt with just in the past year, with residents getting different bills, and that can be a shock. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. This fund is healthier, and we have the ability to absorb that cost a little bit more versus the refuse fund, which is really too lean at this point. And we need to make sure that we're...
It's almost out, right? The refuse fund is almost out. So yes, the question is sewer water is, those are two well-managed funds that have the capital in them. You know, it would be remiss if we didn't continue to talk about the Evergreen project, because that is something that's on the radar, and that's, you know, by all indications from Mr. Richnack, is going to be expensive. So.
Councilman Anderson.
Last year, this is kind of an open question to everybody that was on council last year. We were shown a PowerPoint presentation that showed the fund balance in 5 years, almost at ground zero. And I didn't see that reflected in any of the slides here. Is that for next week, or do you have some feel 5 years from now? Where are we at in relation to?
First of all, next week there is no meeting.
I mean,
It's Wednesday.
yeah.
Everyone comes the right night. And it is something we'll be looking at when we put item 10 together.
And the second question was, I just jotted a note down, without further analysis, we don't know if the community center could become a profit center. Is that something that is kind of an ongoing project, or something that we could look at? Again, looking at a function like a community center as compared to Lifetime. And I know there's a lot of differences between the two situations, but is there some analysis that can be done to determine whether we're missing a piece of the pie?
Councilman Henderson, I would say this, because it seems to come up all the time. I think it's a bigger issue than just talking about the community center is this or it's that. Is it cost neutral? Is it going to make a profit? Should it be this? Should it be? I think it's a bigger issue. If the community center is that big issue, let's look at the entire situation. Let's look at the entire operation, because if it's almost breaking even or breaking even, most communities would kill for that opportunity, as well as that facility. So aside from that, though, is, you know, let's look at the whole thing. Let's not just take one little piece, because it's not fair to the operation. It's not fair to the people running. It's not fair to the facility. Let's look at all of it. Staffing levels, you know, a real management analysis of the community center. Because if it's breaking even, that's you know, relatively speaking, competitively speaking, in the same sector, that's very, very good.
If I could just piggyback on that, having been here when that discussion was made, that it was going to survive, and it was only going to survive if it was cost neutral. Okay, that was a mandate that we gave to city administration 3 years ago, because it was at the point where it may close. But we decided to maintain it at cost neutral. So that was a mandate that came from council to administration to do that. And having been around for a while, every time you raise any rates 25 cents on some of the residents, you hear about it. You hear about it very strongly. So I don't have any problem taking a look at it now that things have changed a little bit, but you have to be cognizant that, what do you want? What kind of community center do you want? And, you know, you certainly want seniors to be able to use the facility and not have the cost be prohibitive. So I don't have any problem doing that, but this thing whole started as a mandate to city administration to survive. It had to be cost neutral. So, Mayor Pro Tem Fleming.
Again, to piggyback on that, Mayor, I believe when we started, it was an expense of about $1 million a year, thereabouts. So it's come a long ways. So we were funding that. Now we've got to almost cost neutral, and I'm thinking, is there another opportunity? But we have, I believe staff has taken out considerable amount of overhead from that, but it may still be an opportunity, so I want to look at that. But if I can continue, Mayor, there are a couple of other areas in the city, albeit much smaller, that mentioned tonight. One being the Nature Center, the other being the museum, where we put in the budget money for the Nature Center over and above, and the museum over and above the capital requirements and over and above the building maintenance to fund that. I recall sitting here last year with some members of council, and we basically, I believe, told the Nature Center and the museum, hey, you need to use this year to get your cost in line and to generate revenue and so forth, because it may be very difficult for this council to approve $100,000 for the museum and $75,000 for the Nature Center. And I'm just wondering how this council feels about that, because I remember last year we were pretty adamant about that. But I see it's in the budget. You had no knowledge of that at meeting last year. So.
Well, that's my recollection also. Having learned a valuable lesson, I don't think you ever say never to anything. And you reevaluate. And I think that's what we need to do as a council, reevaluate. We heard some things in presentations, and the city is in a different state than it was last year too. So, Councilman Teets?
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking with people at the council table that said, you know, that we actually amended the budget last year to go from 75 to 0 for this year. And then secondly, I understand there is money there, but I think we have to question what's the priority of the taxpayer as far as, you know, if they had $75,000 or $100,000 in their hand, what would they want that money used for? And I don't know if that's the priority on the priority list for the taxpayer at this point. Because there are a lot of other projects that I think are still outstanding, and that's one significant sticking point I have at this point, is that I'm concerned that on the list of things that folks want, this may not be a priority.
Yeah, I was also pretty adamant about not increasing that budget as well, but my line of thinking was I didn't want to see a line item for what we were contributing to that again and an increase in their budget. Because that seems to be the way things creep. We'll give them this, and then all of a sudden the budget's this, and now we have to keep feeding the monster. I don't think I haven't looked at that number specifically to know, and I think we'll cover that Wednesday. So we'll be able to analyze that a little bit further. But I also don't. I don't think we, at least in the museum situation, we don't need those buildings to waste away and be a problem. So it's kind of a quagmire. I also believe that they've incorporated some personnel to try to a board or committee or more committee members, and they're reevaluating some of their revenue sources. So it's going to be a good conversation.
Councilman McGinnis?
I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind though too, which is maybe just reflecting back on a couple of years before some other people were on council. So I remember when we made the decision that the museum and the library, which was included in a sense, we've changed the course because of the millage and other things, but the museum and the nature center, that was like an all or nothing. I mean, it was like, we don't have the money to fund these things. We didn't have an ERIP program. We were looking at the alternative was going to be laying off police officers and all of these other things with infrastructure that we decided that we weren't going to do. So at that point, it was an all or nothing decision, really. And since then, things have changed. We're looking at it now in terms of the ERIP program, and I'm not saying that we need to use those dollars to reinstate some of the programs that were all or nothing, but I do think maybe we have a little bit of cushion, and maybe it'll allow them to do more planning. I mean, we essentially told the museum and the museum and the nature center, next year, figure it out. I mean, we'll give you this small stipend, but there was no planning beyond that. And I think that I wish we could be a little bit more realistic, so it doesn't seem like each year we're getting figures that maybe we hadn't had a chance to look at long term. But I think at this point, I don't really want to look at it in the same way we did originally, which was an all or nothing. Either figure it out or you're off. I mean, I think we kind of have to look at hopefully a little bit more long-term, but I don't think we're in a position necessarily where we would have to think all or nothing and those facilities are going to close, because it's still going to leave us with, you know, keeping up with the buildings and all of these other things that are still going to be in our city and things that we're going to have to maintain and take care of. So I'm not necessarily at the point where I want to look at them as all or nothing. I do want to look at some long-term planning. We've asked the library and some of our other facilities to go out and do some strategic planning so they can say to us, you know, here's what we foresee. And I know that the other organizations are doing that as well, but I think we need to kind of focus on big picture. And instead of saying, well, this year, this is it, next year, no more, it might be better for us as a council to say, okay, let's look at the next 3 years and make a decision instead of going year to year. So that's kind of how I feel on those. But I did have one question about the police department. I know if we have 99 sworn officers, how many officers are filling those positions at this point then?
Chief, would you like to?
I would be more than willing to discuss that, but Tom Gordon has been waiting for this.
As of today, we are short 7 non-sworn PSA positions and 7 sworn police officer positions. So we're down 14 right now. And we're making a lot of headroom in getting these people hired. It does take time, and we're trudging along.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That sworn was 12 last time we talked?
I think since the last time we were here, we've got six hires on
Six
board.
hired.
Three last week. One we're already to take furlough time.
Could I just say one more thing about the museum and nature center? And I think it's points well taken, and I think we all need to reflect on Wednesday when we come back. Take a look at the presentations that were done by both the museum and the nature center. And but I do think Councilwoman McGinnis brings up a strong point that we should be looking at a plan of some kind. But things have changed. Councilman
That was
Henderson.
going to be my comment, essentially, is maybe Wednesday night if they could come with whatever plans they have to try to bolster the financing years to come.
I think they would be extremely happy to do that. I see some nodding.
Well, having not been around forever, the question would be, if the community center cost $1 million approximately per year, and they were given that cost-neutral mandate, how long did it take? They didn't get that done in 1 year, did they?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you did?
That was a mandate. You close or you get cost neutral.
That year?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And believe me, they cut programs and they did a lot. They did a lot to stay open.
Right.
It's a credit to what they did, really.
And those times are a little bit different.
Those times are different, and you know, it was we were making decisions that were unprecedented, you know, and here we are today. But
I guess ideally, you wouldn't want to function like that.
No.
I mean, I just, you know, looking at Carol and the stress on her face from just those days, you know, a plan is the real way to prepare yourself into success. I mean,
well, we did have a plan. You know, we had a 3-year plan, but you know, very aggressive because it had to be very aggressive.
yeah, I mean, you were under different circumstances.
Right. You had to do things drastic back then, maybe not drastic now.
Well, I think Mr. Kishner put it very well. We are reevaluating and trying to get more in a level playing field now. And this just really boils down to what is on every single page here. And that is, what kind of city do you want to be? And that's really what it really all boils down to. Any more questions? How's your foot?
Great.
That's affected your voice, I see. More questions? Your public comment is our next. Before we move to public comment, could I just read what's in the agenda? The budget is available for review at the city clerk's office, the Troy Public Library, and on the city's website, www.troymi.gov/budget. So it is there for anyone to take a look at, and we welcome the comments. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak this evening? Would you please come forward and state your name and speak into the mic?
I'll try that. Yeah, I'm Jim Wierpatinsky. Just real briefly, I just want to commend you for these wonderful presentations tonight. These are really great. I don't know if that was the best part or just the positive energy in this room. It seems like everybody knows that we hit the bottom and we're on the way back up, and just everything just seems brighter now. And so I was really impressed with that. And I'm also impressed with all the changes that are being made. It's like the police chief saying, you know, we've changed things in the police department so the police can get out there and write more tickets. And of course, I love that because I don't like people the way they drive, so I write lots of tickets. But anyway, everything's just wonderful. And to see the graphs up there where the lines have flattened out and some of them even hockey stick now and stuff, you know, the worst is behind us. I just never felt more positive. And so just keep it up, and as my friend George W. Bush would say, you're all doing a hell of a good job. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak this evening? Hearing none, we are adjourned.